Hi, my name is Sue Cronmiller, and I'm the Program Director for the Imagining Santa Ana series of public humanities events. Imagining Santa Ana is a 2-year series of public humanities events and programs for the whole community offered through the El Sol Science and Arts Academy. Imagining Santa Ana honors and celebrates the cultural heritage and artistry of Santa Ana's Chicano community. All events in the series will feature local artists and culture bearers in conversation, co-creation, and collaboration with faculty, students, and alumni of El Sol. The first event really was inspired by the mural project that was being completed by the Santa Ana's Workshop for Community Arts. And was a local poet, Adriana Alexander, and then a local artist, Isidro Perez, who were coming together and actually involving the students and the teachers in the images that were to be included in the murals. So we were really already bringing in the voices of all of these different constituencies to contribute to the character and the breadth of these public humanities events. And it was the artists actually who suggested that we do a mural blessing. And we had Aztec dancers come and they danced for the mural. We had a celebration with a local culture bearer named David Vasquez, who had been giving workshops in the Aztec language, Nahuatl, and Mexican culture to the community. He had been doing this for decades, and we were really lucky to meet him through this event.
Niese tiakawani, tiakawani kwauhte, tiakawani wawas, tiakawani koyo.
The community attended the event beyond all of our expectations, considering that the day of our festival it was pouring rain, and the school's dance instructor, Beatriz Munoz, she was delighted to teach the kids some dances in the ancient Aztec tradition, and so they were dressed up in the Aztec costumes. It was a fun beginning. We had a really good time.
Oh, minha maconha, minha torcida, minha querida, minha galera. Oh, minha cachoeira, minha menina, minha flamenga, minha capoeira. Oh, minha menina, minha querida, minha Valéria. Oh, minha maloca, minha la rica, minha cachaça, minha cadeira. Minha vagabunda, oh, minha vida, minha mambembe, minha ladeira. Oh, minha menina, minha querida, minha Valéria. Oh, minha torcida, minha flamenga, minha cadeira.
A los niños les encantó todo lo que hicimos de las aztecas y gracias a Dios hemos tenido los niños muchas experiencias en eso. Les ha gustado bastante lo que hacen, lo que usan, porque usan las plumitas y todo eso, sus atuendos aquí, su taparrabo. Ellos son muy felices y contentos. Pues ellos aprenden más que nada la cultura de sus padres. Y también ellos aprenden mucho a que, mi papá lo hacía en México, yo lo hago aquí también. Y fijan casi un poco con lo que es lo de sus padres, su país.
I've actually never really been to my parents' part of Mexico. And I think it's a really fun culture to explore. And I really like my culture of Mexican. It's really nice. I love dancing it. It's very fun and a very active, and it's also good for your health. It's a good way to stay active.
This was the first event that was intended to include the entire community, and we reached out beyond the walls of the school. And typically schools, even though they have the potential to be a great resource for cultural events and knowledge in the community, oftentimes schools, they're self-contained. But we were trying to broaden that, kind of dissolve the walls between, the institution and the neighborhood to, really kind of provide a welcoming and very inclusive space to celebrate and honor the cultural heritage of this place. Riding off the success of the first event and the momentum that we were building, we scheduled the second event in the series took place in May, and we brought in once again David Vasquez, the Nahuatl instructor, and he did a workshop in the introduction to the language of Nahuatl. And alongside that workshop, Isidro Perez, the muralist, he did a beautiful workshop in painting with natural pigment, and he spent the morning harvesting all of the natural materials that he would use that day, and it was just beautifully arranged within the classroom. So it was a really fun time.
Cuando se dobla la tortilla, está así, se llama hash.
Ok, so ahora tenemos este color.
Correré mi destino por no llevar papel, perdido en el corazón de la grande Babilón. Me dicen el clandestino, yo soy el quebra ley, mano negra clandestina, peruano clandestino.
Well, for the third event, we connected with our local artists that we had met and started to collaborate with. We met Adriana through the previous two events, and she agreed to design and deliver a watercolor workshop based on the work of local artist Manuel Hernandez Trujillo, who had sadly passed on just the year before. But his watercolors are wonderful, and it was a really enriching workshop that Adriana put together. Participants learned about how Manuel Hernandez Trujillo used art as activism in the Chicano arts movement, and they were connecting with themselves and their own family and their own cultural identity in these artworks that they created with Adriana.
Today we were covering a lesson about Manuel Hernandez Trujillo and some of the artwork that he created. He grows up around the 1960s and really gets into activism by using his creative voice to talk about issues that are facing people of color, but also to embrace his roots. He's talking about Mexican art history and showing a picture of a Chicano that we don't often see, one where he is empowered. And so that was the main topic of today, and I was showing these students today how to use mixed media by using oil pastels and watercolor to create some of the images covering some of his favorite topics about identity, topics about being Mexican American, and about family and connections to the outside world. Art in the community brings people together. When they are able to be creative together, they can create these connections that sometimes we just don't have access to. Especially in today's society, we rarely or not very often interact with one another on deeper topics. So doing creative things together allows us to connect to one another.
Well, this one was really well attended. It was the beginning of a collaboration with Dr. Ana Rosas at UCI, and a lot of her students came out. There were UCI students there and neighbors from the community, which leads into the the fourth event, which was also based on the work of Manuel Hernandez Trujillo, and it was more of a festival and celebration. In December of that first year, in 2019, we turned up the volume again and we had this huge festival similar to the first, the Blessing of the Mural. The El Sol dancers performing in the Ballet Folklorico and also in the Aztec regalia. And then a good friend of the school, Manuel Gomez, who has been a friend of the school since its beginning. And he and I have been poets in partnership for many years. And actually, that was another really beautiful way for Manuel to celebrate his good friend, the artist.
We are celebrating today Manuel Hernandez Trujillo, a great artist that has inspired a lot of activism and community empowerment here in California, but also in other states. And we are showing a film, and also Dr. Manuel Gomez will be speaking about the history or the forced separations that happened in Mexico. It is important that we have these kinds of events to remember who we are as a community, how we can make a difference, and also to pass it on to younger generations.
As you see, a lot of kids really active in the culture, and it's so important that we continue these traditions. Something that started decades ago continues on into generations and generations. For example, my son's mother actually performed this when she was their age. So to carry it and echo it over the generations is beautiful.
The impact that we have seen here in the community is bringing people together, either to enjoy watching the students perform an Aztec dance and remembering who we are, but also interacting with each other.
We as a people have experienced 4 historical separations in our history, which has formed us into who we are today and will continue to influence who we become tomorrow as we move forward into our future.
After translating for Dr. Manuel Gomez, it's actually very inspiring to relearn the history of Mexico. Being born in Mexico, knowing that part of history, but also coming to the United States and knowing a different kind of history has impacted me to become a better person, but also knowing that everyone has struggled and that we continue the struggle for a better life and better opportunities for the children.
I really think the El Sol Academy is quite a place to think about, reflect, create together, and to learn from the trajectories of artists like Manuel Hernandez Trujillo. I'm here in the capacity of trying to make sure that UCI students, undergraduate students, are a part of this community making this creative work. We started our collaboration by partaking in workshops and different kinds of meetings that center on how to coexist and how to become allies in this larger project of creating together.
And so I think these kinds of events are important. Our children, my future grandchildren, need to see projects like this. They need to be inspired. They need to feel good about themselves. They need to feel proud of their language, be proud of their food, be proud of their music, be proud of the contributions we've made as Latinos to this country and to the world.
We're just so happy that we're able to be a part of this. We're able to showcase our school, who we are as a community, but also to show them the history of where they come in and to remind them the struggles that their parents have gone through and that are going to continue to go through, but that we all just want a better life for our children in the future. Did you enjoy dancing?
Yeah, it makes me feel who I am, and it also reminds me when I feel when I'm in the future.
You're the future?
The Dancing with the Sun Festival in December of 2019 was actually the last big live event we were able to complete before the pandemic hit the next year. We had a spring festival that was scheduled to take place in March of 2020, but as the months went by, it became evident that it wasn't going to happen. So we decided to pivot and offer the first Zoom event that we put together was actually another really strong collaboration with UC Irvine, and Dr. Rosas and her public scholarship students. It gave us actually an opportunity to go into more depth with Dr. Manuel Gomez. The fifth event was called You Belong Here in the Garden of Healing, and it was an interview between Dr. Rosas and UCI undergraduates who crafted very careful questions to ask Dr. Gomez about his lifelong career as an administrator at UCI. And actually, the event really did provide a lot of really wonderful and useful information to young Chicano Latino studies students. Dr. Gomez himself was the very first Latino vice chancellor in the entire UC system, so he has a wealth of knowledge.
Hi, Dr. Gomez. My name is Geraldine Santos from Eastvale, California. I am currently studying psychological sciences and Chicano Latino studies here at UC Irvine. And after getting the opportunity to read your work, Dancing with the Sun, I was able to gather that your admiration of Manuel Hernandez Trujillo's work stems from Trujillo's level of authenticity and love for Aztec cultural history. So a question I would really love to ask you is, what advice do you have for many of us who are striving to achieve social justice with that same level of love for indigenous culture as part of our vision of social justice?
Thank you very much for both those questions. The first question regarding how we can become more effective with regard to understanding our own indigenous roots. I said very quickly that there are many modes of learning, and I think that in speaking generally, we can speak about a distinct indigenous perspective about learning. It's connected to nature. We learn, and it's connected to place, and it's connected to who we are. Most native names are we the people of the river, we the people of the mountain, we the people of where they are. They're connected to their place. And most of their learning takes place in circles, not squares, not in lines. And there's no use of shame generally. We never use shame in learning. There's no D's and F's. Generally, in the indigenous perspective of learning, it's an inner process, not an outer process. It's an inside activity that's not a commodity or a paper at the end of a degree, like the Western notion. I'm not attacking either mode of learning, by the way. I want you to understand this. I'm just expressing to you that there are different modes of learning, and there's a distinction, fundamental distinction, between how you can learn about our indigeneity, because it's not going to be taught in the university, even in Chicano studies, most likely. It's got to get back to a grounding of your own ancestors, your own history, your own memories. And if you just look in the mirror, you'll see how connected we are to this land and to the people of these lands.
After we got our feet wet with Zoom, we were able to kind of reconceive these events as something that could include even a wider community. And the sixth event was what we wound up calling the Big Read and virtual reunion. The conception of the Big Read was that we would bring together students from 20 years of poetry workshops and publications here at El Sol. So I was able to reconnect with El Sol students who were now, graduates of university and raising their own families. And then we had a young student that one of the UCI interns met in El Salvador when she herself went home to tend to family during the pandemic. And this young El Salvadoran student joined us and read a poem from one of the books.
Mystery Song. I am a wizard under a cloud of darkness. I am a crab wet and sharp as a knife. I am a sky Who but I reflect the wind that turns in my direction? I am a duck that is hatching and biting. I am a root that leads to my death. Natalie Castaneda.
For the 7th event, you know, we had to keep going, so we did yet another Zoom event, and that also was another opportunity in disguise where we brought the El Sol, a group of El Sol students together, and we interviewed the muralists who had, during COVID, created a second community mural here at El Sol.
The artists and community arts organizers, Adriana Alexander and Isidro Perez, known to most of us as Chilo, they are longtime residents of Santa Ana and have been active in the city's art scene and with art projects with various groups in Santa Ana, such as El Centro Cultural de Mexico and SAPO. And more recently, they have been engaged in several large community participatory mural projects at El Sol Academy.
Painting a community mural during a pandemic was something we had to think a lot about because, you know, we definitely, you know, need everyone to be safe. We can't just have a free-for-all painting day, you know, where anybody can do anything. We have to be a little more controlled. So we knew we wanted the kids involved because it's their mural, it's their school, you know. So we worked with the school and we tried to figure out a way that, like, okay, how can we make this happen where kids get to feel like they had a big part in it. And so we decided to have the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th graders come out 5 at a time, and we just worked with them kind of almost one-on-one. We gave them a little spot on the mural and we said, here you go, this is yours. And Chilo showed them, like, you know, what colors to paint it, and sometimes he showed them, you know, like shading or something like that, or mixing colors, and then they just painted it, and it was really cool, and they did a great job. And one day, right after the 2nd graders had finished painting, the 3rd graders came out, and we told them, the 2nd graders did this. And they looked around and they were like, wow, they did an amazing job.
One of the important things in, like, bringing in the kids to paint is to inspire them. We might see in the future, right, some of these kids picking up the art. Brown people or people of color get excluded sometimes, and there's not a lot of representation in the art, at least in the art world. And so I think that's one of the goals, right, to keep inspiring people to keep working and to keep doing art, but of course for just creativity, inspiration, and yeah.
When we painted this table scene over here, the people who live across the street, they came by and they said, this looks like something we would have in our house. This looks like a scene from our family, right? And that to me was that's why representation is important, right? Because you see something that looks like you, right? We again started with questions, asking questions to the students and to the staff and you know, the school community. And then we asked people, how has the last year been for you? And then asked a series of questions kind of based on that, like, what have you been feeling? You know, what have you been learning? And then so based on all the answers we got back, we created this design. So a lot of students expressed their knowledge of pandemic protocols. So they would say, you know, we wear masks, we stay 6 feet apart, you know, we wash our hands, and you know, that's really in their heads right now for obvious reasons. And we didn't exactly want to put that in the mural, you know, as literal images. So we started thinking about what does that look like in sort of a more imaginative way. And so that's why we ended up with all these characters with masks on, but they're sort of like fun masks. And then you notice also, like, a lot of the figures are kind of apart from each other in the beginning of the mural. And then as you move more towards the end of the mural, there's more of a coming together. So there's a little aspect of that as well. We started with the idea of bilingual poetry with the first mural, because one of the things that kids and staff both were really proud about their school was that it's a bilingual school, a dual language school. And so the first time we thought about how do we get bilingualism on the wall, and the poetry was sort of a solution to that. And it's something I think people really liked. And I really liked it since I'm a poet. So with the second mural, we wanted to incorporate the bilingual poetry again, but this time we also put a lot of thought into how does that poetry kind of speak to the situation we're in right now. And so we tried to choose poems that were kind of with a theme of the circle of life, because that's kind of where we ended up after reading through everybody's answers, which is both, the joy and celebration of life, but also, the grief part of it. And so with not just with the images, but also with the poetry, we're trying to incorporate that. What I hope this mural means to people is that they see themselves in it, right? And that so my favorite parts are when we come by sometimes and we see at one point there was a father and a kid, and they were reading one of the poems on the mural, and they were reading it together. And that was for me was an example of what I hope the mural means to people. They connect with the art, but they connect with each other, and it becomes something meaningful to them for whatever reason.
So finally, we got the green light from El Sol that we could actually have an outdoor live public event once again. And so we went to work. The great event at the end was so spectacular because the community was just ready to come out and get together again, and we were so well attended. We served tacos, we had the live music, and then the El Sol dancers did several beautiful dance sets representing the various regions of Mexico and different costumes, and it was just really very satisfying, and I think everybody had a really wonderful time.
Today we're basically celebrating art, culture, and the representation of how kids through education can contribute to the creation of spaces that can reflect their identities and their culture to the community.
El Sol is a very close-knit community. So now being able to have the cultural events such as today's has been something that we have been yearning for. Bringing not only the school community, but the community from Santa Ana and from other cities around the county. It's just a great, perfect way for togetherness and awareness and just observance and.
Events that can bring together a school community, students and parents are very important because you are here for the same reason, and that is to support student learning, showcasing performances, artwork, and involving your students in the middle school side by them coming together and doing a civic action is important to show that we're not just here to teach the students, reading and math, but also involve them in the arts and inspire them to pursue those careers in the future. When Adriana and Chilo involved the students in the process of coming up with ideas for the mural, but also the students themselves had the opportunity to paint parts of the mural. And that to me, it's a 360 where we're involving the students in the whole process, from the very beginning to the very end. And the end is this, the end is the blessing of it, celebrating.
The importance of events like today is to bring community together, to bring the kids together, to have them have like a sense of pride of what they did, right? Like collaborating, painting on the wall, answering the questions, working with the teachers, also the teachers working with us, the whole school, the community coming together, That's the whole idea of like these events, right? Like blessing also the mural, making it more, giving the mural that kind of importance of almost like being alive, right? Like having this power to like influence people because people are gonna be interacting with it and seeing it, right? So just that idea of like familiarizing the community with the mural,
I think art is just a way to express yourself. It's a way to express ourselves in a very confined way. Like it's very powerful. My exposure to also it really gave me a sense of hope. It gave me everything I could that I could get from my life experiences, and then I can implement it in my poetry. And that's what I am doing with poetry right now.
Well, now from this vantage point at the end of our, the completion of the Imagining Santa Ana public events, I can really see how it has promoted, connections and community outreach. It's also affected the culture of the school. Now, the end of this series will not be the end of these kinds of events. These public humanities events really help us gather together to celebrate culture and heritage and to learn from one another, to celebrate cultural diversity and to remember that we each individually have rich cultural heritage that we may want to share with others and to celebrate ourselves. So they help us belong. They help us to learn and acknowledge and appreciate one another and to celebrate humanity. Humanity is what humans do. I want to thank California Humanities for making these events possible and for believing in us and that we could make all of these things happen, even in the toughest of times.
Pues quiero darle las gracias a la organización de California Humanities por estos eventos y pues que se lo sigan haciendo más para que ayuden a la comunidad. Gracias.
No, but just a huge thank you to Cal Humanities also for supporting this project. It really does make a difference because, you can't do a project without funding, and it, for them to give this money to this community, it's really important and meaningful. So thank you.